1960s, a multiracial group of intrepid young people made their ways from all over the United States and Canada to the southern US. They sought to lend their efforts to the modern civil rights movement, America's second Reconstruction. They joined the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, the most innovative and most uncompromising of the major civil rights organizations. A handful of these young people chose photography as their organizing tool. Danny Lyon, Geoffrey Clark, Doris Derby, Fred Devan, Bob Fletcher, Rufus Hinton, Francis Mitchell, Clifford Vaz, Maria Varela, Tamio Wakayama, Norris McNamara, Doy Gorton, Mary King, Casey Hayden, Julius Lester, Doug Harris. Some, like Danny Lyon, arrived with technical expertise and equipment of their own. Others, like Doug Harris and Bob Fletcher, took part in a weekend-long tutorial by a prominent photographer, Richard Avedon, in New York City. Others received training from Matt Herron, an independent photojournalist and former student of Minor White and Dorothea Lange. Some received cameras through donations from photographers sympathetic to the movement, and those whose cameras were damaged in the course of fieldwork and the chaos of demonstrations would have their equipment repaired at no cost by Marty Forscher, who ran professional camera repair service here in Midtown Manhattan. Almost all served in the field on voter registration, literacy training, or direct action programs, visually documenting the people they worked with and the events, demonstrations, and projects they helped organize. The photographers learned how to develop their film in SNCC darkrooms in Atlanta, Selma, and Tougaloo, funded by donations from actor and activist Harry Belafonte, photographer Aaron Siskind, among many, many others. And their final products were printed on the photo offset press in the constantly expanding print shop in the Atlanta headquarters and distributed by the SNCC Photo Agency, established officially in 1964. SNCC, perhaps more than any other civil rights group of the time, understood the importance of photographs, not only as documents of efforts of thousands to tear down the world of Southern oppression, but also as visual bricks in the raising of a new, multiracial, equitable society. SNCC recognized that it was not simply enough to intervene in dominant media frames and overcome the national press blackout, or whiteout, as SNCC Executive Secretary James Forman described it. Instead, SNCC developed a formidable media structure of its own, in which photographs were bedrock. Photographers of SNCC Photo Agency saw their images included in SNCC's own newspaper, as well as mainstream news outlets. As photographers became more deeply rooted and routed in the movement, photography became more nimble, responding to the needs of the movement and the communities in which the photographers were embedded. Photographs became posters and film strips, political primers and teaching tools, postcards, calendars, and photo essay books. SNCC photographers took up photography as they came to recognize the camera was an indispensable part of the fight, a tool for literacy and storytelling, a weapon against the prevalence of violence that was brutal, routine, and often happened without witness. So too did the camera offer a vehicle for self-expression and a portal for crafting new constellations of solidarity, of community care, and collective well-being in the world. Not only did these emerging photographers introduce and teach audiences in their moment, and ours, about the civil rights movement through their images, but they learned their cameras and their craft through their time in the movement. We look to this body of work now as indelible records of a seismic hegemonic shift in this nation's history. We must also look to this work as efforts to change our vision, to shift our sight for the nation's future. As series editor with Sarah Lewis and Deb Willis, I am pleased that the third offering of the Vision and Justice book series will be a monograph of the work of Doug Harris, photographer and filmmaker. Through a focus on prolific but understudied photographers and thinkers like Harris, the series aims to correct omissions in our received canons of photography in order to tell a richer, more racially inclusive story. But more than this, by centering Black practitioners working across photography's many forms, the Vision and Justice series compels us to ask new questions of our histories and of the medium itself. One question that Doug Harris's body of work invites us to consider is what are the contours of a photographic practice born in social movement? That is, what does a photographic practice look like when one is trained not in art school, but in the crucible of street protests and rural organizing efforts, in marathon organizing meetings, in the uncertainty of a struggle whose outcome is not guaranteed? What happens to a photographic education when your eye becomes attuned to the beauty and struggle of the communities you live and work alongside, when indeed the camera is not yours alone, but is a vessel for collective freedom dreaming and often necessary for collective survival? What does a life of camera work look like when born in such urgency and shaped through love? Born in 1943, Doug Harris was a college student at Hofstra University in Long Island when he joined SNCC. He first arrived at the headquarters in Atlanta, and then after this famed tutorial with Richard Avedon, Harris was dispatched to Halifax County, North Carolina, Lowndes County, Alabama, and elsewhere. Harris took on numerous photography assignments from Executive Secretary Ruby Doris Smith Robinson in SNCC headquarters, driving from location to location in a 55 Chevy that the organization purchased for him. During these years on the road, Harris made all sorts of images of the organizing efforts of the Lowndes County Freedom Organization, also called the Black Panther Party, of SNCC's cultural projects, the Freedom Singers and the Free Southern Theater, and of daily life in the movement. Nothing in my life, Harris later recounted, has been greater than my experience with SNCC. After his time in SNCC, Harris returned to New York City. He would take the lessons he'd learned about portraiture and action photography, about photojournalism and film strips, and about movement building itself, and bring them to his own Harlem community. He taught film production at City College of New York and worked as a cinematographer for PBS Channel 13's Black Journal and ABC's Like It Is, hosted by Gil Noble. In 1969, Harris co-founded the film production company Harlem Audio Visuals, together with comrade SNCC photographer Rufus Hinton, Rufus's brother James Hinton, Black arts movement poet and playwright Larry Neal, and Edward Spriggs, the first director of the then newly formed Studio Museum in Harlem. Harlem Audio Visuals' mission was, quote, to carry on the business of producing, creating, distributing, and otherwise dealing in motion pictures of all types, and to create meaningful opportunities for aspiring Black filmmakers. Among their projects, Harlem Audio Visuals filmed and produced The New Arc, directed by Amiri Baraka. From the late 1960s to the 1990s, Harris photographed and filmed Black life in Harlem, New Orleans, Senegal, Kenya, and elsewhere. He documented the resistance movements in Angola and Zimbabwe for Third World Newsreel, and he made a film about jazz drummer Milton Graves. Harris's contact sheets reveal a set of seamless conversations between the political, the artistic, and the everyday. The Harlem Theater Movement, Andrew Young's first bid for Congress, Fannie Lou Hamer's Harlem meeting with Malcolm X, and Malcolm X's meeting with Mississippi youth at his office in Harlem. Black artists and their work, museum spaces, protests, and continued search for human rights. In the 1990s, Harris remarried, moved to Rhode Island, and became the Deputy Tribal Historic Preservation Officer and preservationist for ceremonial landscapes for the Narragansett tribe. Though his photography output slowed significantly in these years, Harris continued his commitment to community chronicling and archiving through a focus on monuments and memorialization of the Narragansett peoples. So what do we learn about vision and justice from Doug Harris? From the longer arc of Harris's work, we learn that the camera is not just a weapon against the persistent violence and inequities of American racial dictatorship, but the camera is also a tool for care as an antidote to violence, for the creation of a new sovereign visual history. We learn the importance of a photographer who is known by their community, who focuses attention on the minor and major figures alike. Put another way, we learn the photographic practice of the beloved community. In the abundance of recently discovered contact sheets, slides, and prints, almost all of which have never been seen publicly before now, we learn that there are more and different stories to tell. And as we endeavor to bring this book to fruition against the clock, as Doug Harris is unwell and has been in hospice, there is much more work to do. And here I want to acknowledge the incredible labor of researcher and curator Alexa Dilworth, who, with the fantastic support of everyone at Aperture, has been working with Doug's wife, Genevieve, to assemble, catalog, and digitize Doug's vast archive. So too do I want to thank the Ford Foundation and the late Agnes Gunn for their support of the book series, and the contributors who have written and who will write. For me, the Vision and Justice series is about honoring legacy and mining the archive. Indeed, in this case, assembling the archive for the lessons they offer us now. This is ancestor work, which, as we know, is also future generations' work. That is, providing guidebooks for ourselves and those to come about how our elders navigated inhospitable terrain, moved through the darkest of times, and used their cameras to light new paths. I am reminded of this work, Doug Harris's work, our work, in the images of hands across his archive. Hands that labor, hands that gesture and guide our attention, hands that support, hands that rest, hands that dance, that play music, that make art, hands that mourn, and hands that rejoice. Doug Harris's filmmaking and photographic career in service of struggle and bound by love of community shows us what it means to labor within something larger than the self, to photograph how we are connected both to one another and to this shared, if increasingly censored and disparaged past. But it also reminds us of the words of Frederick Douglass, who insisted that power concedes nothing without demand, and that the camera in the hands of a movement photographer can also be that demand. Thank you.